Today, we're diving into the incredibly fascinating and honestly, highly contradictory life of John Tyler. We're going to look at how a man who was specifically chosen just to unify voters and win an election ended up totally alienated by pretty much everyone in Washington. To really grasp the massive constitutional crisis that defined his legacy, we have to start with a big question. What actually happens when a sitting United States president dies in office for the very first time? Today we completely take that for granted. We have crystal clear succession laws. But back in the 1840s, totally uncharted territory. So to see how America navigated this crisis, let's trace the bizarre political trajectory of America's 10th president. Section 1. A Virginian aristocrat. John Tyler's roots were planted firmly in Virginia's wealthy elite. Born in 1790, he grew up on his family's massive plantation, Greenway, and his early life was really defined by immense privilege and quick accomplishments. After graduating from the prestigious College of William and Mary in 1807, he went straight on to study law. By 1813, he was married to Letitia Christian, and he built his very own plantation called Woodburn. Now, the harsh reality of life at Woodburn was that the Tyler family's wealth was built entirely on the institution of slavery. If we look at the census data, it shows that in 1820, 24 enslaved people lived there, and some of those individuals Tyler had actually inherited from his father's estate. Fast forward to 1830, that number grew to 29, and notably, more than half of those individuals were children under the age of 10. Right alongside the growth of the enslaved population, Tyler's own family was expanding rapidly too. By that same 1830 census, his household had skyrocketed from 3 children all the way up to 7, ranging from his 15-year-old daughter down to a newborn son. Section 2. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. As Tyler stepped onto the national political stage in the 1820s and 30s, this massive friction in his political identity started to show. See, on one hand, he considered himself a lifelong Democrat. But on the other hand, he relentlessly opposed the sitting Democratic president, Andrew Jackson. Why? Because of executive overreach. Tyler was the staunch defender of state power, which put him fundamentally at odds with the leader of his very own party. Well, the opposing party looked at this friction and saw the ultimate political loophole. In 1839, the Whig Party nominated William Henry Harrison for president, but they really needed a way to pull Southern votes away from the incumbent Democrats. Their solution? John Tyler. Think about it. A Virginian slave owner and lifelong Democrat who just so happened to hate Andrew Jackson's overreach. He was literally the perfect bait to bring in those Southern voters. And this incredibly unlikely pairing of political bedfellows gave birth to a legendary campaign slogan. Tippecanoe highlighted Harrison's famous military victory, and Tyler, too, was the hook for the Southern vote. The strategy worked flawlessly, and they absolutely crushed President Van Buren. Section 3. The accidental president. So the Whigs won the White House. But their relationship with their new vice president changed completely in the spring of 1841. Just weeks after his March inauguration, President Harrison unexpectedly died. And the Constitution at the time was super vague on this. Was the vice president now the actual president or just an acting placeholder? Well, Tyler didn't hesitate for a second. He immediately took the oath of office right then and there, with Harrison's cabinet present, seizing full presidential authority. But we have to remember, Tyler was basically a Democrat acting as a Whig. So once he actually got into the Oval Office, he quickly clashed with the exact same Whig leaders who had put him there in the first place. The real breaking point came when he vetoed a major bill that was meant to revive the Second Bank of the United States. That single signature set off a visceral, immediate backlash from politicians and everyday citizens alike. That veto triggered an absolute political domino effect. Furious Whigs officially cast Tyler completely out of their ranks and protest almost his entire cabinet. The very men he had literally just taken the oath in front of resigned. Meanwhile, his old Democratic allies basically viewed him as a turncoat and kept their distance. Tyler was totally isolated politically. He was so radioactive that by 1848, neither party even considered him for their ticket. Completely engulfed in this political turmoil, Tyler's detractors decided to weaponize his unprecedented rise to power. They came up with a brutal nickname, his accidency. It was a constant, mocking reminder that he only held the highest office in the land by the sheer accident of Harrison's death. Section 4. Annexation and retirement. Despite being a president without a party and facing total political ruin, Tyler was still determined to govern. And he actually managed to secure his most notable achievement right as the clock ran out, the annexation of Texas. Just days before leaving the White House, Tyler successfully signed the legislation for this expansionist goal, something he had aggressively pursued for years. Now, while he was navigating all this political warfare, Tyler's personal life was marked by incredible tragedy and eventually new beginnings. In 1842, while he was still in office, he suffered the devastating loss of his wife Letitia to a stroke. They'd been married for 30 years, raising 8 children together. 2 years later, he married Julia Gardner. And after his presidency wrapped up, the couple retreated from Washington entirely, retiring to Sherwood Plantation in Virginia, where they went on to have 7 children together. Section 5. A Confederate State Funeral. So Tyler's story didn't just end with a quiet retirement in Virginia. On the eve of the Civil War, with the entire nation fracturing, the former president made a really shocking return to politics. He served as a representative at the 1861 Peace Conference, but he ultimately rejected their proposed resolutions. He then officially aligned himself with the South and was even elected as a representative for the newly formed Confederacy. He died in Richmond, Virginia, on January 18, 1862, at 71 years old, right before he could actually take his seat. His death set the stage for one final, glaring historical irony. Tyler had specifically requested a simple burial, but Confederate leaders saw a propaganda opportunity they just couldn't pass up. Ignoring his dying wishes completely, they orchestrated a massive, grand state funeral for the former U.S. president. His remains were laid in state in the Hall of Congress in Richmond, and that was followed by grand memorial services at St. Paul's Episcopal Church and this massive procession to Hollywood Cemetery. Think about that for a second. In death, a former president of the United States was co-opted into a powerful symbol for the exact rebellion that was actively trying to destroy the country he once swore an oath to lead. And in, perhaps, the starkest display of this completely fractured legacy, his coffin was not draped with the American flag. Historical records show it was covered, quote, with the flag of his country. He was a former U.S. president, wrapped for eternity in the banner of the Confederacy. So, as we wrap up this explainer on a truly unique figure in American history, I want to leave you with this to ponder. How do we actually judge this deeply paradoxical legacy? Here's a man who set the constitutional precedent for presidential succession, who achieved major national expansion by annexing Texas, yet who alienated his allies, was cast out by his own government, and ultimately died as a sworn elected representative of a rebellion against the very nation he once led. What do you think?